Good evening and welcome. I call to order the Newman City Council regular meeting, September 10th, 2024. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain stand for the invocation.
Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to say good evening to all and to all who are online listening. Is that I just want to just lift up this country. And I was just speaking with Fire Chief, in reference to the fires that are just, it seems like every year that we go through this. And it's sometimes it's just terrible in terms of people losing their lives and their homes and everything. And Chief said that some of our men are going to be going down south. Now I have something really to pray for that department. And I just said that to say this to you all that are listening in the sound of my voice. Not only keep our country in prayer, but let's keep our service people in prayer. Our chief of police, our chief of the fire department, our city managers and clerks, and all the rest of the service people that serve this city that we call Newman. We have been pretty blessed to have some of the best professional people here in the city of Newman that have taken care and kept us to where we can go to sleep at night and have no worries. I said all that to say this, that we are here to take care of the business of the city of Newman and let all minds be cleared and do the business. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for that. Roll call.
Councilmember McDonald.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ball.
Here.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Here.
Mayor Graham.
Here. Any declarations of conflicts of interest tonight? None? Okay. No ceremonial items. Items from the public, non-agenda items. Anybody wishing to speak tonight, go up to the podium. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, City of Newman. Justin Farkas representing the Office of Assemblyman Juan Alanis. Excited to be here with you guys today. It's our second week out of session. There's a caveat to that, which if you've been following the news, you may know that. But of the regular session that we hold for 2 years has come to an end. And I'm grateful to report that Assemblyman Alanis has been incredibly successful on passing good policy for our community and the greater area of the state of California. We've been fortunate to pass 17 bills over our first term to the governor's desk. We had 5 signed last year. We're at 3 or 4 this year, and we still have another 9 pending his signature. So we're really excited to be hearing from him. Took a lot of steps a couple weeks back addressing the retail theft issues, trying to help different departments, local, rail police, all these CHP kind of collaborate on how they're going to address this issue, and dealing with education, working with personal financial literacy for students, making that a requirement in our schools so they can help navigate the ebbs and flows of the economy here in the state of California and around the country. So we've been really working hard on those things, also focusing some more on protecting some of the youth here in the community, and we're really excited to see the rest of our bill package for this term make it through the rest of the way with the governor's signature. So thank you guys for your time. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, and we appreciate you being here and updating us. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? No? All right. Item number 8, consent calendar. A, waive all readings of ordinance and resolution except by title. B, approval of warrants. C, approval of minutes of the August 27th, 2024 meeting.
I'll move that we accept the consent calendar for this period.
A second.
And for a second, go and vote electronically. Motion carries 4-0. Item number 9, public hearings. There are none tonight. Item number 10, regular business. A, approve the 2024 water rate study and authorize the city manager to initiate the Proposition 218 proceedings for changing water rates. one, adopt resolution 2024, next number, resolution approving the 2024 water rate study.
Evening, Mayor and members of the Newman City Council. Back in March, the council authorized staff to contract with Hansford Economic Consulting to conduct a water rate study. The reason for the water rate study is to take a look 6 years in advance to see what rates we will need to charge in order to maintain the financial stability of our water fund, projecting out our maintenance costs, repairs that we have to do, payroll costs looking forward. Catherine, who's the principal from Hansford Economic Consulting, is here tonight to present the findings of that report. Catherine?
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. So I want to give just a little bit of background, first of all, and describe and explain that the water system is considered to be a business-type enterprise fund. And so the purpose of an enterprise fund is to fund itself sufficiently without any subsidization from any other funds, particularly the city's general fund, which is so important for providing essential services, parks and recreation, roads, and other public works and other programming. So this should be a self-sufficient fund. It is funded primarily through water rates, and it is exclusive for water service. About 92% of water system annual costs in a typical year are supported by water rates. There are a few other miscellaneous types of revenues that come in, including interest income, sometimes some grants, and so forth. But the primary source of revenue is the water rates. And rates are usually reviewed about every 5 years. That's the standard. Sometimes we go out a little bit further if there's some kind of capital project we know is on the horizon. And sometimes you need to come back to it a little bit sooner if perhaps you had a large capital expenditure you had to take care of. Well, the water fund's financial performance has been strong. In 2019, we conducted a water rate study. Those rates were implemented in 2020, and the water fund has been in good financial shape since then. The operating costs are paid for with the rates. Capital costs are paid for with a combination of rates, connection fees, and grants and loans. And so just to kind of distinguish between the two a little bit, the rates pay for the rehabilitation or replacement of assets to provide the capacity for your existing customers, and the connection fees pay for the increased capacity in those rehabilitated assets and the new assets to serve new customers. So just to state that so that everyone knows that we're really focusing on the rates and making sure that the existing customers are being taken care of with their facilities. As Mr. Humphreys already mentioned, the purpose of the rate study is revenue sufficiency to ensure that the water system can be operated for the next 6 years, meeting all regulatory requirements for the residents and businesses in Newman. And secondly, to fund the Capital Improvements Project, or CIP, ensuring that facilities are rehabilitated for those existing customers. To ensure there are adequate reserves, providing cash flow and funds for any potential emergencies. And finally, to fulfill financial agreement obligations. The city does have an existing loan with the state, and that comes with certain requirements restricting cash and ensuring that there's adequate debt service coverage. So rate studies, they're to support multiple objectives. I mentioned revenue sufficiency. Want to make sure that your rates are simple and logical, compatible with your billing system, that you're signaling a value of service, and supporting city goals. 5 years ago, we had a really hard look at this, and the rate structure was modified. This year, in looking at the data, surprisingly little has changed. In fact, almost nothing has changed in terms of characteristics, how your customers are using the water. The median use of water per household has stayed about the same. So I do mention on another slide, but there's no rate structure changes proposed in this rate study. There are some legal requirements that come with a rate study. First of all, that the revenues from the fee shall not exceed the funds required to provide the service. Second, that the fee shall not be used for any purpose other than that for which it was imposed. Third, the amount of the fee imposed as an incident of property ownership shall not exceed the proportional cost of service to the parcel. That no fee may be imposed for service unless the service is used by that property or is immediately available to the parcel. And then finally, you can't use this fee to provide other general government services that you have. So that's the legal side. Major assumptions for this rate study. I mentioned we already did a very thorough cost of service study in 2019. This study has confirmed that there's no significant changes in characteristics of water use by customer categories. Therefore, it is proposed that the rate structure stays the same. Looking forward in growth and how many new customers you might receive in the next 6 years, that has been estimated at 30 new 1-inch meters per year based on the historical trend and also discussion with city staff. And the final major assumption for this rate model is a new loan for chromium-6 regulatory compliance. There is a well 5, that needs to comply with the state's regulatory requirement for chromium-6 by October of 2027. While there may be another source of funding that actually comes to fruition, what we have done is assume that there would be another state loan for this project. In reality, the city, I'm sure, will be trying to look for grants, and that might come through. But just to be a little bit more conservative, we've assumed a very low-cost model, just with a 1% interest rate and a payback of 40 years. This pie chart demonstrates that the majority of the use of water in the city is by residential customers. About 72% of the water use is by residential customers. About 10% by landscape, that's irrigation customers, 13% by industrial users, and 5% by commercial users. So vast majority of the use is residential. In building the water rate model, the first thing to do is to look at the revenue requirement. And this determines the amount of funding that will be needed to be raised through rates. So it includes the operations and maintenance costs. It includes capital improvements that serve the existing customers, some system rehabilitation, debt service, and ensuring that there are prudent reserves as well. The main costs for the water fund are personnel costs at about 42%. Utilities, electricity, fuel, about 15%, some contract services. But all in all, this pie chart looks very typical to me. This is what I see in a lot of cities and larger size special districts. That's very normal to have your personnel costs be about 40 to 60% actually is about what I usually see. Looking at the water fund capital projects, now these are estimates. The city provided me with estimates of the projects that would be needed in the next 6 years, and I did inflate those. I used a 4% annual inflator so that you are hopefully collecting enough money to pay for those projects. Inflation is always a little hard to predict, and the last few years, construction costs and infrastructure costs did rise dramatically. So in total, the cost to ratepayers for capital projects is about $4 million over the next 6 years. When developing the rates, not only do we want to make sure that you're covering those operations and maintenance costs and capital costs and so forth, but keeping that prudent reserve. And so defining what is a prudent reserve, in 2019, we defined that as being at least 6 months of operating expenses. I recommend you stay at that level. You have a requirement by the SRF loan to keep at least $236,300 in a restricted account. And then you also have a requirement from the state that your net operating income exceeds debt service by at least 1.2. And there's no issues with any of these requirements now. And there's projected not to be any issues with this, with the rates that are calculated. So the graph that you see here is this projected revenue requirement. And it's got a stacking of colors. That green at the bottom is the debt service that you're paying for your existing loan. The orange is the operating expenses, and that's projected to increase according to historical changes. Part of that's inflation, part of that is cost of living expenses for personnel, those kinds of costs. And then the blue is that facilities repair and upgrade for the existing customers. And you can see some years that's larger than others, those capital projects. The black line is how much revenue you're currently collecting. And the red line is the projected amount of revenue that you would collect from rates with the calculated rate schedule. So you can see that the rates revenue will not exactly meet the total amount of revenue requirement in a couple of years, and that's absolutely fine. That is because you have the reserves in your fund to pay for those costs. What you don't want to have to do is have rates that go up and down. It's much better to have smoother stepwise progression of rates, and so that was built in the last rate study, and it's recommended for this one too. On this graph, this is showing the projected operating fund cash balances. The green line is that target cash balance, as I said, 6 months of operating expenses. The blue is the projection of the unrestricted cash balance with the rate increase. And so you can see that decline in the first 2 years in the cash balance. And as I mentioned on the last slide, that's because you're using the money to pay for capital projects. So you're still going to meet that minimum cash balance. It'll get a little bit closer to that target cash balance over the next 6 years. But as I said, that's okay. And that's what your reserve is for. In this graph, I'm showing you the bill impact for most homes. So most homes in Newman have a 5/8" water meter, or your newer homes have a 1" meter because of fire flow requirements. But still, the majority of your homes have a 5/8" meter. And the median water use for residential homes is 1,100 cubic feet a month. At that level of consumption, currently the water bill is $49.12. With the rate increase going into effect in January of 2025, that would increase to $57.80. And then you can see that it would increase each January, and we went out 6 years. So by January 2030, that same amount of water consumption would cost $84.49. I have a graph here that compares water bills for a home with other cities in your region. Note here that this is for a 1" meter. So a lot of cities have moved toward having their rates be for a 1" meter and above because of the fire flow requirements. So just in case you're wondering why on this graph it shows $50.12 for your current water bill, and on the last graph I said $49. That's because now we're looking at a 1" meter. So Newman is about in the middle of the range of these comparison cities in terms of a water bill. In January of 2025, that would move up to the mid to higher range. But this graph is really a snapshot in time. I do know that some of these cities will also be increasing their rates in January of 2025. So just you may end up a little bit more down towards the middle of the range again in January. And looking at the large water users, the city does have two large water users. One is the Saputo Industries, and the other is the school district. And so there is a graph here in the report just showing what the impact would be for those customers. And randomly picked some commercial customers also to give an illustration of what the bills would look like over the next 6 years. They are random. Commercial customers are much harder to show a median use of because they're all very different. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through the rate adoption process. In terms of timeline, this is the draft report presentation, and when you be asked to accept the report and to move forward with the next steps for implementation. The next step would be to mail out the Proposition 218 notices. That goes to every property owner who receives water service from the city. And on November 12th, there would be a public hearing and rates resolution presented to council. People can come, they can mail in protests, they can appear in person, and they can provide a protest too at that time if they wish to. Assuming that there are not sufficient protests, City Council can move forward at that time with adopting a rates resolution and have the new rates be in effect in January. Customers do have a right to protest. Every property owner has the right to protest for each of the parcels that they receive service at, but only one protest can be counted per parcel, and protests must be in writing. They cannot be submitted electronically. The valid protest, and all of this will be described on that 218 notice that they receive. It has to have the customer's name, the address or the parcel number served, a statement of the rates being protested, and a signature and a date. And all of those things must be present to be counted and be a valid protest. As I mentioned, at the close of the public hearing, the protests are counted, and if 50% plus one of the owners of public record protest, then the city cannot proceed. But absent that protest, the city can proceed with adoption of maximum rates. At any time, and I put here the next 5 years, actually I should have said 6 because we're going out 6 years. The city can freeze or reduce the rates shown on the notice, but cannot increase them without another public noticing process. And after adoption of rates, a new law was passed in 2022, stating that there is a 120-day statute of limitation for ratepayers to challenge increased rates. So any challenge must be filed within that 120 days for it to have validity. Okay, so I'll answer any questions.
Yes. Okay, with some significant help, I've been trying to wrap my head around this since we received the item on Thursday or Friday. Just looking for some talking points for our residents, which includes us, in terms of the fees going up from $49 to about $85 over a 5-6 year period. First talking point, the city cannot use water fees for profit, correct? Okay. And it's based on state regulations, which include inflation, correct? Okay. And if we were to not go forward with these rates, now we're looking at significant cuts to our general fund, correct? It would impact our general fund if we did not go forward with raising rates.
Potentially, yes, we believe it would. At some point, yes.
Okay, I was just looking for some talking points because we will get questions. Often we don't get the questions until after it goes into effect. But I want to make sure that we get the word out there to our citizens that rates are going up, potentially going up. You can still protest them, but here's why we are where we are, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a question too, is that basically, and I brought this up at the beginning, in reference to rates. There's quite a few senior citizens here in the city of Newman. And this is something that I stressed with Lou and to our city manager, that these people are on fixed incomes. And I know you probably have nothing to do with it simply because you're the woman or the firm that just put together the language. But the key to it is this, is that these people are basically on fixed incomes. And if we don't have a cap somewhere along that line, you're gonna run a lot of these seniors out of town. And the key to it is this, is that I'm looking at these rates year by year going up. And we're talking about a rate at one time and not telling them that these rates are going to continue to rise on you. And I understand, you know, that we're a growing city and that basically these rates have to do with us maintaining, the city, being able to function. But in saying all that, we need to keep in mind about these seniors, because when you look around the town of Newman, there's quite a few seniors that are in here, and a lot of them on fixed incomes. And we need to keep that in mind.
And is there a program for seniors or for low income?
We do not currently have a program, but that would be subsidized by the general fund. Lou, do you want to?
So the only program that we do have, it's not a senior program, it's a low-income program, and that's under the sewer fund, where they can apply for it, and there's a slight reduction in the rate. And believe me, I understand when we're talking about seniors' costs. I mean, my parents went through the same thing. They lived down in LA, where rates were quite expensive. The one thing that we have to look at as leaders, managers of the water fund for our city is that we are somewhat limited by the expenditures we incur. For example, we have motors at every one of our wells to pull water out of the ground.
Right.
And that's PG&E. And if you own a home in town, you know PG&E ain't cheap. And if you're running motors pretty much all day long and all night long to pull water out of the ground to pressurize our system, it's expensive. Be happy to show you any of our PG&E bills for a month, and I'm sure it'll shock a lot of you. So we are kind of subject to certain limitations. When I look at water rate studies that we do, some of the things that I look at are we being excessive? Are we buying things that we really don't need? Is there a Ferrari on there for somebody? Is there really super expensive trucks? Are we getting vehicles that have got features on them that maybe we use once a year? And we don't put those things on there because we know it's going to affect the rates of the people. And that's out of all the things that we can do in a city, we can't control property taxes. We can't control the state sales tax rate. But we can control water and sewer rates to an extent, and that's just by being frugal with what we do with our money, what we buy. And we've done that. The problem is that, as everybody knows, you go out to a restaurant, it's a lot more expensive than it used to be. You go to the supermarket, meat ain't what it used to be, price-wise. Everything's going up, and it affects cities and all the things that we do. When we have to buy replacement vehicles, when we have to go out and buy pipes. Perfect example, water meters. 2-3 years ago, we could get a 1-inch water meter with a wireless radio feature on it for $240. They're now $500, just over a few years. And $500 times 3,000 people, that's quite a bit of money. So things like that, it just affects us. We're kind of a victim and subject to the events of the world that happen to us as well. But again, we try to be fair with what we do. We're not trying to go overboard.
Well, let me say this, is that I feel very comfortable with yourself, city manager. You guys have basically been, really taking control of our city. Our city has become the #1 city on the west side. And it's only because of people like yourselves that have managed this city and made sure that we don't overgrow ourselves. And I only say these things simply because the seniors are in my heart. And I understand because I know my parents, just like you said about your parents, they were having difficult times with high rates and stuff in San Francisco. So in saying all that, I'm just hoping that along the line somewhere that we just keep them in mind, because our seniors are, it's the history of this country. Of this city. And we need to make sure that we just keep them in our hearts and our minds.
Councilman, your comments aren't lost on us, and we run a pretty lean program. I think our superintendent, Ms. Perfecta Milan, runs a pretty tight ship. And you have to think we have multiple wells,
Right.
miles upon miles of pipelines, fire hydrants, and it's important that when you turn your faucet on, something comes out and it's clean. It's not brown. Some of our neighbors turn on their water and brown water comes out. Ours isn't. And it's important that when Chief Bowen goes to the fire hydrant and there's adequate pressure there to put out a fire. So that's all we're trying to do. And we do a pretty lean job, and 4 people in our water department for all that we have. So it's a pretty lean operation, and we try to keep those costs down because, again, we're just trying to protect the ratepayers.
Correct.
So what would be the effect if we were to recheck the rate adjustments, maybe say 3 years versus 6 years down the road to
Yeah,
review
so-
it and adjust it accordingly to how the market is, how inflation is.
So in 3 years, what we could do, and I think it's a very valid point, we could look at it at, let's just say 2 years or 3 years. The big one is we have that cost for a replacement of the chromium 6 well.
Yeah.
If we're able to get grant funding or some of the other things, and maybe that comes in, then we can reevaluate and say, okay, maybe we don't need to raise it as high as the water rate study says, and we can hold it down a little bit lower. There's no, you're going to set a fee program for each January, but you can always come back and say, I'm not going to raise it that high come January of 2027. So you're setting rates for each of the next 6 years, but you have the authority to not raise it as high as it's permitted under the rate study. You can't go higher, but you cannot raise it as high as what's being done under this act in November, correct?
Each year?
Excuse me?
Could we put it in review for each year?
Well, I don't know if we do it every other year. It's probably because there's anomalies, right? You don't want to have a year. I think the big one is going to be in 27 when that well comes on. That's a big capital cost. So when we know how that's going to be paid for, that's one of the biggest capital costs. Then we can reevaluate at that point, and Lou can run the numbers and say, you know what, we're doing fine. Our reserves are fine. We're not having to tap into them. So therefore, he'll make a recommendation based upon what the numbers show.
And that's a valid point. That's a valid point in terms of that. And I thought, Councilman, that you brought up a good
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason that I brought to my attention, so in this study, it's projecting the growth of all the future developments within the city, correct?
Well, it's taken a little bit in, but we got to remember these rates are only there to maintain the existing system.
Okay.
These aren't designed for growth. These rates are designed to maintain the existing system.
So when the growth comes into effect, how is that going to affect existing when we're adding more?
So the growth will come in, the growth pays for itself through impact fees. So at that point in time, if we need to enlarge the system, each house pays an impact fee, and then we utilize that fund to grow the system.
Makes sense.
What we're talking about today is really the operations and maintenance of an existing system.
Yeah, gotcha.
But as you know, just like at your house, your pipes don't last forever, right?
Yeah.
Your pipes at your house, it may be 20 years old, depending on how old your house is, you're going to have to do some plumbing work. We have that too. We have 50-year-old pipes. We have 20-year-old pipes. We have a lot of older pipes, but we have some newer ones as well. So, we have to replace those. And you've all seen broken water lines in streets before where we've had to dig them out and stuff. So we have to keep that system operational. It's key to our community. It's key to our businesses. It's key to our residents.
I think we should maybe bring that, if everyone, we can get on the same page, maybe review in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think
For that.
Yeah, I think it's very valid. I think it's very valid. And I think, again, once we figure out what's going to happen with well 5, that's the key component. We can report back to you. Obviously, we have to report back to you because there's going to be costs associated with it. There's going to be design. There's going to be bids and awards and bids. So we can look at that, and there'll be funding sources that we'll evaluate and then reevaluate the funds, the rates, and see if it's still appropriate to go all the way to the top, or do we look at maybe slightly looking at dropping those?
Yeah. Anybody else? Good. I'll open it up to the public for any questions, comments. All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for action.
Okay, I move to approve the 2024 water rate study and authorize the city manager to initiate Proposition 218 proceedings for changing water rates. 1, adopt resolution number 2024. Are we taking these separately?
Yeah, let's do one at a
Just
time,
one,
please.
okay.
And I'll second.
Adopt resolution 2024, resolution approving the 2024 water rate study.
And I'll second that.
We have first and second, go and vote. Motion carries 4-0. Item number 2 of the same topic. Adopt resolution 2024, next number, resolution authorizing the city manager to initiate Proposition 218 proceedings for changing water rates.
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
We got first and second. Go ahead and vote electronically.
So with that,
Carries 4-0.
excuse me, Mayor. So with that, are we going to have some type of language to where Councilman brought up that we do an evaluation every 2 to 3 years?
We'll bring that back to you.
On the final, when we come back in,
Well, now we've already started the vote. As your staff, you can always direct us down the road, but we'll remember to bring it back to you. Especially when we start talking about the rehab of well 5, it'll jog your memory. Okay, where we at? What kind of funding did we get? And how does that impact the water rates?
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Lou. Regular business, item number B, adopt a resolution 2024, next number, a resolution of concurrence and adopt acceptance of the Stanislaus Home Consortium and the Stanislaus Urban County Fiscal Year 2023-24 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, CAPR.
Keeper. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is an annual event that we do where we look at everything that we did last year and report it out. As you know, we are a member of the Stanislaus County Home Consortium and the Urban County and we get an allotment of home funds every year. And we have to report out how we did there at every year and provide that report to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. In 23-24, we were allotted just under 150,000, but just over 150,000. We've been banking that money because we're doing a project in the Sunshine Park area. That's around the 1900 block of Leslie, Sydney, Pine Court, and Pine Street. We're doing the design work right now, tree removal, sidewalk curb, gutter, street repair, and some overlays out there as well. A lot of that's been damaged by tree roots. As you know, if you've ever been to the area, that's one of our older areas of older stock housing. And so just years of trees have impacted our roadways and our curb gutters and sidewalks. We're expecting that project will go out to bid next summer. So tonight we're asking you to open up and just to comment. Anybody who wants to comment on the 23-24 CAPER Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. And if you're not seeing any, then we would ask that you would recommend or approve the resolution within your package.
Any questions on that? I'll open up to the public for any questions or comments. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council.
Okay, I'll move to adopt resolution number 2024, resolution of concurrence and acceptance of the Stanislaus Home Consortium and Stanislaus Urban County Fiscal Year 23-24 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, CAPER.
second.
Motion carries 4-0. Item number C, approve the use of development impact fees for inspection improvements.
Intersection.
Intersection,
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you, Mayor.
I forgot my glasses tonight.
So this one goes back to in March of this year. This item went before the Planning Commission, and it was a site plan review application to do a 3,800 square foot fast food restaurant here on the southeast corner of Merced Street and Highway 33, as you can see here on the map. As part of that approval, the applicant is required to put all new curb, gutter, and sidewalk along the entire stretch of Highway 33 from Merced Street all the way to Stanislaus, as well as widen Merced Street. This will facilitate also, as many of you know, it's a tight intersection for trucks, right? And so our general plan indicates that Merced Street is a 90-foot right-of-way, so it needs to be widened by 5 feet as well. And so when the applicant did the design work for there, they started noticing that there's a lot of infrastructure here that's going to be required to be removed in order to clean up this intersection. As you can see here, there's the stoplight You can see it's close to the corner. That's all being moved back because you're going to widen Merced Street by 5 feet. There's also these boxes here. Those are for the traffic signals and the loops that are in the road. Those are going to need to be relocated as well. You got street lights. You're going to have to put in a new highway handicap ramp there as well. But you can see here how this is a super tight turn. And anyone who's been at this intersection, when there's a truck trying to turn on there, knows you got to be careful. Sometimes cars are backing up, right, in order that that truck can turn. And it doesn't matter if they're, westbound on Merced turning on to Highway 33. Are they northbound on Highway 33 turning on into onto Merced Street? It's very tight. So we're asking that this intersection be redesigned with a 55-foot turning radius. Visually, what that means to you is if you go to the Inyo intersection that was just rebuilt and you look at the mini storage corner, that's a 55. It's a lot more sweeping, right? And when we ran the truck turning movements, that's what it takes in order to get that done. Again, this is showing some more of the improvements. There's those boxes again that are going to have to be relocated because there's loops in the ground. And
It's
then
going to go underground.
I doubt it because Caltrans works on them.
Okay.
They're probably going to just be moved back accordingly. Go back. So, this is kind of showing the intersection over here. So, but also by moving it 5 and changing that 55, because we don't fully have Caltrans, all their comments yet, we may have to restripe because there might be a little bit of angles off. You never know with Caltrans. They may want the other 2 corners redone as well with new handicap ramps. So we're planning for that as well. Because we're moving this arm here for the traffic signal, we're going to have to, buy new arms and mask to signal it up because the reach is going to be further. They're going to have to be further back. So we, as like all municipalities, collect impact fees. We just talked a little bit about water impact fees, but we also do traffic impact fees. And in fact, we're in the middle of a study right now to update our impact fees. This intersection, we do collect impact fees for this intersection. So in working with the developer, we've looked at what their proposal is, and they're asking for up to $640,000 for reimbursement of intersection improvements that should be covered under development impact fees. So we are asking that the council authorize the city manager to go ahead and utilize up to $640,000 for intersection improvements. And what we would do is they would show us what the cost was, what the improvements were, and then we would reimburse them through either cash and or fee credits towards their applications and some of the other things that are going on there. So that's our presentation to you. I know the applicants are here in case you have any questions for them.
We recuperate any of that cost from Caltrans?
No. Caltrans is not going to, they're just going to say, just leave it the way it is, they're fine. Once you start touching it, you have to pay for it.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. No, they won't pay for any of that cost.
So we're only affecting the curve at the stoplight signs, right?
Yeah, the major one is going to be this here corner, the southeast corner here. But just, again, envision all new curb, gutter, sidewalks, handicap ramp access on there. And all that's going to be done as part of this. But these poles and these boxes are going to then move further south and east into the property there. The good thing is the relocation of these facilities does not affect the interior improvements. So they've done a good job of designing that already so that we can get this done without doing any major alterations to their interior improvements as well. So.
All right. Any further questions from you guys? No. I'll open up to the public for any comments, questions. All right. I'll bring it back to council for action.
I move we approve item 10C, approve the use, or we're at 10C, approve the use of the development impact fees for intersection improvements.
I'll second that.
Got first and second, go and vote. Motion carries 4-0. Item 11 tonight, items from the city manager and staff. Michael?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. A couple good things to report today. We have heard from Foster Farms. Foster Farms has kind of been going through some internal issues, but we are now close to closing escrow on that property. I think we're putting, we just have to do a little amendment to allow us to continue through, but probably no later than the middle to late October, we should be in possession of that property, which moves into the next piece. And I don't know if you got the email from Congressman Dort's office, but we submitted an application for funding to clean up that site. And he's recommended that we, the city of Newman, receive funds to clean up that site and get it ready for future development, which would be ground floor commercial office space with a second story residential uses on there as well. So that's gonna be great. So we're gonna buy the property for $1. We went out and got some grant funding to clean it all up, and we're gonna have a nice clean site there to rehab that site. It's a full half city block, so it'll be a good thing to move improvements towards downtown. On top of that, we have Stancog funds coming in, I think in 2027, 28, right around that time, that do a bunch of street and Main Street and Stanislaus Street improvements in that area. So that's going to, the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a real rehab and renaissance growth going on South Main Street. So. News is moving along, some good improvements that are going on out there. And then we submitted a grant application for the nature park through the San Joaquin River Exchange Contractors Exchange. They're recommending that we're going to get $150,000 for an outdoor education center out there. So I haven't heard if they voted on that yet, but that's going to be the recommendation, that we get $150,000 to fund the outdoor education center in that particular area, in that particular project. And then lastly, the bane of my existence, the housing element will be going to Planning Commission this month, and then you get to sit through it in October, second meeting in October. So that'll be fun. My last one. So happy. I can answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Allie?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just to report on, we are starting our adult volleyball league at YOLO Middle School. If you have any questions or want to join the adult volleyball league, you contact me or Q for a team availability. We also have adult men's basketball starting on Friday nights and Sunday nights at YOLO Middle School. And we've also started our soccer league. So if you see a lot of vehicles out there on the weekends on Saturdays, that's our youth soccer league taking place. Stop by for a hamburger or a hot dog. With that, I can answer any questions that y'all may have.
Are the hamburger and hot dogs free?
Well, we could figure something out.
Playing basketball?
We could do an exchange. You could come help us cook them.
Yeah.
Any other questions I can answer?
None? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Sergeant, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank
20
you.
years old.
That's right. And holding. I'll start by saying go Niners.
Yeah.
We will be hosting a DUI checkpoint on Saturday. It is funded by our grant that we received from the Office of Traffic Safety. Thank you to CHP in advance for coming out to assist us. We are required to announce the checkpoint, but we are not required to disclose the location. So it'll be within the city of Newman.
What time was that again?
What's that?
When was it again?
It'll be Saturday.
Same day as the Canelo fight.
Oh, there you go. And then the last thing that I have is Saturday, September 21st. Animal Control will be hosting the low-cost animal clinic, and that'll be from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Louis Newman building. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the animal, that's a free community thing?
It's low cost, so there are vouchers for spay and neuters, and that is for Newman residents only. They also offer low-cost shots for animals. For those, obviously, you have to bring your pet with you.
Right.
But if you're applying for a voucher, then you don't need to bring your pet. And the shots are open to any, you don't necessarily have to live in Newman, but the vouchers are for Newman residents.
Lou?
Just real briefly on the Prop 218 notices, those will be mailed out tomorrow, so all of our residents will start seeing those over the next couple of days. And they'll have till November 12th to file their protest. And other than that, happy to answer the questions you may have.
Thank you. Thomas?
Thank you. So outreach during the Fall Festival went really well. We had good turnout at the city booth. We had the outreach. We focused on our regular items, of course, but also the urban forest management plan, and of course, FEMA flood outreach. And I just want to reiterate, the public works staff did a great job setting up for Fall Festival and then tearing it all down afterwards, along with the other support from city staff. Inyo and Canal School Road post-construction compliance review was today with Caltrans oversight engineer and Govea Engineering. The review went well, and the engineer was satisfied with the documentation and was expressed his. He was impressed with the organization, so I want to thank Govea for that and of those documents. And there was no findings, preliminary findings from that review. And last council meeting mentioned the pre-construction for Jensen Road improvement. So that's still, we're estimating end of September, early October for that, depending on some Caltrans permitting. And if you have any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay.
Kathy used to bring these donuts and ice cream.
I'll review past recordings and to determine what kind of donuts.
Chief?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We do have a couple firefighters deployed to the line fire down south, and we may potentially have another deployment tomorrow morning or afternoon. So I appreciate the kind words, and I pray that you guys all, or ask that you all continue to pray for them. We're also doing recruitment. So if you know anyone that's looking to volunteer, firefighters 18 years and older, send them our way. We're going to start a fire academy again and get them all trained. And we're also taking explorers. So if any of you guys have high school age children that are looking to see what the fire service career is all about, send them our way, and we'll get them dialed in. And I can answer any other questions you guys might have.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Pro Tem?
Nothing tonight.
Councilman?
Go Niners.
Nothing.
I would like to thank Christine Eddington and all the people that worked on the Fall Festival, including the city people. Allie for getting us our vehicle. Fall Festival was great. It turned out really good, so I appreciate all the hard work. All the officers that spent all the time down there, as well as fire. I know it was a long weekend for both. So we appreciate your guys' hard work. It sounded like there was no real issues, and it turned out to be a good event. So thank you. And with that, I'll ask for adjournment.
Move we adjourn.
Verse?
I'll second it.